Good day, Maggie. I'm
Yeah,
so excited to
Helen.
be here with you today.
It's lovely to be together, and this is very exciting to be able to do this. Really is.
Yes, so today, the point of our discussion really is 2020 has been a difficult year, just from the beginning of the year, um, not just in Zimbabwe, but I think the world over. We started the year with the bushfires in Australia. Before long, we had COVID-19. Currently, there's the whole crisis happening in the States with the racial tension that's been going on. So I just thought it would be helpful if we had a discussion in terms of being able to give people tips and strategies of how to cope during such difficult and tumultuous times. So before we jump into everything, who is Maggie Norton?
I'm a mother of 4 sons.
Yes.
And it seems like yesterday they were teenagers, but they're all in their 30s now. And I'm a grandmother. My training is actually in occupational therapy, which I did in England. And I have been counselling for the last 30 years. And I see people at home for various things that they're struggling with, lots of anxiety and depression and family issues. But my passion is to help young people to really live their lives to the full and to fulfill their purpose.
We found you to be of such great benefit and value to the girls at Peterhouse Girls, and just want to say thank you for that, and just looking forward for that continued relationship going forward. So lockdown in Zimbabwe has been, probably we're going into the end of our third month with lockdown, and you find families are in a situation that they've never experienced before, where particularly families of borders, where individuals are in one place for this extended period and sort of enacting all of their roles in that one environment and having to interact with each other in ways that they probably haven't done before.
Absolutely.
What sort of things do you think could be happening in homes at the moment?
It is. It's a very unusual situation to be in, and as teenagers they'll be struggling so much with the lack of independence and being able to be with their friends and be free to explore and develop their identity. And it's a very, very big test of character, really. And be actually missing the friendships mainly. And being in a home for much longer and in a confined space. Thank goodness for the internet, so there is a lot of connection there, I'm sure. But it's the change, it's the difference, and it's the fear that has come in. Also, hearing other people in the family or relatives talking about what could happen or what ifs.
So you mentioned how it's they get a sense of their worth from their peer groups. Adolescence is a critical time for development, and
Very much so.
just speaking to some of the girls, I think that's one of the things that they are missing, the fact that they're not with their peers. But what other things could be at play here?
So they'll be missing, funnily enough, the routine and structure of school, where you have different activities and you see different age groups, and it may be the prefect who's missing their responsibilities at school and the opportunities to go into the art room or into the music room. And now they've just got the confines of their home. And they'll be missing very, very much, as we said, their peer group, because that's who they share their ideas with and their emotions with, and their joys and sorrows and their problems. And they'll be really missing their lack of personal space. and now they're having to share the house with all the family and maybe siblings barging into their bedrooms, or having relatives pop in, but not their own age group so much. And they may even be struggling being part of sort of family arguments or relationship issues that suddenly they're part of and they haven't had to be so much. They'll find it really hard to focus on their schoolwork just for long periods of time, because they're used to having breaks and being able to turn to their friend in the classroom and have a bit of banter, and to get into that routine of sitting down in one place and going through all the different subjects that they have to do, and missing the variation of moving between classrooms. And there's always that feeling as a teenager, I remember it so well, that everybody else will be having fun and I'm not. And it's just boring, and maybe my friends are doing fun things and I'm not. Yeah. And also it's this sort of confusion over this virus, that we've heard all sorts of scary things about it, but actually I haven't seen it too close to home. So it is a confusing time, that this change that's happened in my life, why is it happening? Is it real? And they may be watching things on the TV that are really frightening, but it's not actually happening to me now.
In their space.
So it's a confusing time, and feeling more anxious actually, and a bit stressed, because they're not doing as much activity. Those sporty guys and girls who are used to getting rid of their stress on their sports field and the rugby pitch or the hockey or swimming, well, not actually in the winter term, hey. But that's a very big stress reliever, and now there isn't that. And needing the change of scenery. And there could actually be, in some cases, somebody in the family that's causing them a lot of stress, that they're used to being able to get away from, and now they have to deal with this. And I'm sure for some, it's a very difficult time.
So it sounds like there's a myriad of issues that are probably prevailing in many, many homes. How do you think the different personalities would be handling that?
It's a really good question. And it's very true. What most psychologists agree on, that there's 4 main personality types, and depending on who they are, they're going to seem to cope better or less well according to personality. So the introverts, the perfectionist, and the phlegmatic character who actually just goes with the flow, they're going to find the lockdown they may find it not quite so difficult, because they're used to being on their own. They love being on their own. They're energized by time on their own. And so this is okay. I find I have more time to actually work through my projects without all the interruptions, and they're organized people. Whereas the extrovert are just climbing the walls because they really want to see their friends, and they want interaction and lots of change of activities, and they're energized by being with lots of people. So it's more likely that if you're the sanguine, fun person, you're likely to really miss your friends a lot more. And if you're the choleric person, the leader type, who's longing to have people around them to organize and to lead, they're going to find it a lot more
difficult.
More difficult.
So what can be done to make this lockdown easier?
So first of all, to realize this is just a season. It feels like it's going on forever. Teenagers tend to live in the moment, and it's difficult to look too far ahead. And if every day seems a bit the same, it will feel a bit depressing. But remember, this will not last. And it's an incredible opportunity to see this as another adventure rather than an ordeal. In fact, I saw that on a poster in the girls' school.
Yeah.
You know, you have a choice to see this as an ordeal or an adventure. And to make a purposeful decision to think, what am I going to learn from this? What is going to change? One lovely teenage girl I spoke to, she said, I really feel like I've changed through this. I've sort of grown up, and I'm not sure that I want to be that giggly girl again. And I've been interacting with adults more, and I feel I've grown. So in that, she decided that this was a positive thing, and that she'd matured through this. And we have a choice to decide whether to be really bored and this is just so boring, or that I'm going to be more active in a different sort of way. Personally, I'm learning the piano for the first time. Wow. And I've really enjoyed that. We can decide to be fitter when we come out of this, or a couch potato. And there's all sorts of things that you can do to make sure that you're keeping fit. Or you can choose to lose connection with your friends, and it's going to be so bad when I get back because I haven't been in touch with my friends, or be in touch with them and choose to connect with someone you haven't before, because you can't in the school environment. You can choose to get behind in your work and go back and feel like you're way back, or you can choose to be the person who's actually being secret doing lots of work, and that you're ahead of your game. And the most important one, I think, is you can choose to be someone who's living in fear, or you can choose to be someone who's living in faith.
So what does that look like if I'm choosing fear versus faith, or faith versus, maybe we can discuss that a little bit?
So personally, I feel that faith is vital. It's the core of us. If where we come from deep inside is that I know that there is a God who loves me, who cares where I am at the moment, who knows everything that's happening to me, and he can use this time not to be destructive, but to be something that really teaches me more about this God who loves me, and that actually how to do that is actually to purposefully decide to get to know him more during this time, and discover that he is faithful, that he is good, that he never leaves you or forsakes you during these times. And how we get to know him isn't just by looking out on a beautiful garden and seeing what he created, but it's also to find out what he says. And what he says comes from the Bible. And of course that's really difficult. How do you just open the Bible and you might get some really difficult passage like from Leviticus or Numbers, but actually there's so many cool stories there, and there's lots of Bible apps that can make the Bible come alive. And personally, I found Christian music really helps. There's some really great bands out there that are giving us some wonderful words from the Bible, but in music. So they might be someone who really learns a lot about God through music. And there's nothing wrong with playing music in your bedroom.
So it's sort of what I'm hearing you say through that is that faith will anchor you during this time, whereas fear will cause everything to sort of spiral out of control.
Absolutely.
And as you were going through that list in terms of what would make lockdown or this time easier, I noticed you use the word choose. Just during this period, I think that's one thing that people have felt has been taken away from them. You have to wash your hands, you have to stay indoors, you have to stay far apart from people. It's like how we're living now hasn't been to our choosing. Are you saying that even in the midst of times like this, one actually does have choices?
Very, very much so. So there are things that we can't control, the weather and who we lock down with, but we can definitely choose how we spend our time, how we feel, what our behavior is, what our attitude is going to be to this. And that really helps.
So
Yeah.
could you give us some practical strategies to cope? What sort of things can people be doing during this time to cope?
Yeah. So I listened to a very interesting chat from a guy who'd been locked down in a submarine. In fact, that was his job. And he said that he spends 3 months in a submarine, imagine, with about 30 people. And he said his advice to teenagers is that you actually do have a structure and routine through your day. And that you do get up at a certain time and you do go to bed at a certain time. And that because it's very, very tempting just to sort of lounge around. But if you know you've got a structure and routine, so this is when I'm going to do my schoolwork, this is when I'm going to do some exercise, this is when I'm going to connect with my friends, then there's something to look forward to, and that you do choose something that really gives you pleasure during the day, and that you do get dressed for the day.
That's a hard one, isn't it?
I
mean, it's more comfortable just to lounge around in your pajamas, I think, for
Absolutely.
most people. I don't know if you noticed a lot of the memes and things that were going around during this time, how certain items of clothing have become redundant because people just want to be in their onesies or their pajamas. So you're saying it's important to get up, get bathed and dressed. As if I'm going somewhere.
Absolutely. And maybe have a day during the week when you crazy dress.
Okay.
So you wear that hat or that article of clothing you haven't worn for ages. And it's fun.
And the goal of that is to make yourself feel better. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else you'd recommend?
So getting out of the house is incredibly important, at least once a day. And, going out for a walk and, even if it's into the garden, changing your space is really, really, really important. And finding time for exercise for at least 30 minutes a day, because there are three chemicals in our body that really help us to feel better. And one of them is the endorphins, and that's obviously exercise. And the other two are dopamine and serotonin. And so finding a new app. My husband and I have been doing something called the 7-minute exercise every day, and we feel better for it. It's really is good. And reaching out to others. You'll be missing your friends like crazy, so connect with a friend. But it's more than that. There will be other people missing you. And to think of other people, and maybe that grandma or granddad or aunt that you haven't been in touch with, and bring joy to someone else by reaching out to them.
So on that aspect of reaching out, how can the connections be over social media? Because especially with teenagers, they tend to use it as a place to hide behind. So what sort of things could they do to actually have real connection using that sort of medium?
So it's making it a very purposeful connection. So it's not just about them finding out about you, but it's you asking questions about them. And it isn't easy, because when we are talking to someone, we're watching their body language, we're listening to their tone of voice, and if it was just over a phone message, we're only actually getting 7% in words and about 37% in our tone of voice, so it's not easy. So it's asking the right questions, really. Yes, and
so we can maximize in that space, because I'm finding, I think some of the terminology being used is quite alienating. So for example, if you look at social distancing, that makes, it's created this space where we are spending time away from each other, and yet being together is one of the things that's really critical for our well-being. So I think it's just to use the tools that are available at the time to try and keep as connected as possible.
Absolutely. And they're experts at that, aren't they?
Yes.
And I'm a bit old for all that techie stuff, but I know there's all sorts of things like Zoom and House Party and all of those things that
they can be using. Anything else that we can add to this list for coping mechanisms during this time?
I think it sounds a bit sort of superficial in a way, but if you imagine yourself like an apple, if you go and choose an apple for a supermarket, you don't choose one that's got a damaged skin, because you know that it'll probably be going rotten inside. And that, if you imagine the skin of an apple, is like our physical. So it is the that helps us to keep emotionally healthy if we're keeping physically healthy. So it does matter what you eat, and keeping hydrated and exercised and getting a good amount of sleep really, really does help. It's tempting when you're at home all the time just to tuck into the crisps all the time, but just to be aware of that, obviously. And finding a place to retreat to. Especially as an introvert, you'll want your space, and that's okay to need your space. And to set up the school area where you do your schoolwork as a place where there's a glass of water and it's your pens are there and there's a nice view of the garden if you can. And it is also important to limit social media time, to be careful of that internet that can actually just, we can live out there instead of in the moment and actually where we are at the time. And that there are specific social media things which will make you feel more anxious. Instagram and Facebook and all these things, because you'll think that everybody's having more fun than you. But actually to use social media or the internet to inspire you, not to drag you down, and that you will use it to learn more. And actually decide to live each day to the full and be grateful for every single day, because most of us are so privileged that there's lots of things that we can be grateful for. And then, maybe writing a journal. And I was thinking our day of Anne Frank. They found her diary, and this is a really unusual time. And what if one of you wrote a journal that had all the feelings and the unusualness of this time, and that 50 years from time, somebody found your journal and discovered, how you actually survived this time.
And I think journaling is also pretty helpful, even in the immediate sense, in that when you put stuff down, it doesn't seem so overwhelming. You sort of contain the fear and contain the anxiety. So that's, I think, quite a helpful tool.
Very, very much.
And I mean, there are various ways for teenagers to do it. It doesn't have to be in a diary that's locked up. I mean, phones and, on your laptop where you can keep your stuff very, very private.
Absolutely.
And I like what you were saying about gratitude. I think that might be a difficult one for many, because this time has been characterized by so many losses and so much negativity. Is there, would you say, opportunities that one can derive or benefits that one can derive from this time?
Very, very much so. The choice to see what I have learnt and what is important and what's not important. And I think most of us will go back to a relatively normal life, having learnt something about ourselves, having grown spiritually and changed physically and emotionally for the better. So that again goes back to the choice.
So this can either be a wasted time or a time where you try and extract from it as much as you possibly can.
Very, very much so.
We've discussed these strategies, and we've been talking largely about teenagers, but this is a time that's been particularly stressful for parents. Would these strategies work for them, or are there other things that they could possibly be doing?
I think very much that what we talked about goes over the whole age group. But for parents, it won't have been an easy time, because they're obviously the ones that may be stressed about their jobs, they have also been on lockdown. They haven't been able to get out and work, and living in a house where there's teenagers, as lovely as they are. This isn't what they were expecting. Yeah. And so everybody needs to know that they've got a right to actually do what they need to do to keep emotionally, physically and spiritually healthy, so that getting boundaries within the home is an extremely important thing, that there's open communication, that everybody can say, look, I'm struggling at the moment, and be honest with each other, and that everybody respects how everybody else is feeling. So if Dad's feeling a bit angry and stressed about his job, that people are respectful of that, and they listen to him and to Mum, trying to get food on the table, and to the teenager who's dying to get out to see their friends. And that personally we found in our family meals are really important, that everybody's allowed their say of what they're feeling, so that everybody's getting to know each other, actually, that it's a precious time of deeper connections. And so communication is very important.
And I think that's probably one of the greatest benefits that's been derived this time, the fact that families have an opportunity to connect at a deeper level. But what I'm hearing you say is this is a time to extend great grace just across the board.
Absolutely.
Just a larger measure of grace.
Of forgiveness by the end of the day, of not carrying what happened the day before onto the next day.
So is there anything else that you would like to leave us with?
Personally, it's been a time of growing in my faith, of discovering that God hasn't left us, that He's with us, He never leaves us or forsakes us, and that He's going to be doing good things in our lives, and He's not lost control.
Even in the midst of a world that seems to be in turmoil, He has not lost control. Thank you so much, Maggie. This is really such a insightful and a comforting conversation, just to understand that this is a season, and in the midst of all of this we still have choices in terms of how we can respond and react to it, and ultimately we, to a large extent, determine who or what we're going to be at the end of all of this. We can choose to be better or just to stagnate, but I think the best choice is just to grow during this time as much as possible. Thank you so much.
Such a privilege.